The pause stretches beyond comfort, thick with a reverence that no camera cue can break. Oprah's fingers twitch slightly over her note cards, now useless, scattered on her lap like fallen armor. Behind the scenes, producers speak in hushed urgency. She needs to regain control, one whispers. But on stage, there's nothing to steer anymore. The moment has moved past format, past brand, past power. Jonathan remains still, not triumphant but grounded, as if this was never about victory, only truth. A man in the second row raises his hand. The staff hesitates, unsure whether to allow. Another unfiltered voice, but the control room gives a nod. The MIC is past. The man, mid-30s, wears a postal worker's uniform. My daughter, he says, voice cracking, she came out to me last year. I didn't handle it right. But then I saw you talking about forgiveness on a podcast, how it doesn't excuse the wound, but it keeps it from getting infected. It changed me. He looks at Jonathan, eyes wet. I just wanted to say thank you. Jonathan bows his head. Slightly. We're all learning, he says. We just have to keep showing up even with our bruises. The audience sits breathless. There is no cheering, no dramatic music swell. Just a room of people seeing someone hold space without performing in it. Oprah tries again. Her voice is low now, nearly uncertain. Do you think faith is for everyone? Even people like me? Jonathan looks at her, not with judgment, not even with sadness, just presence. I think faith waits for all of us, he says. But it doesn't shout, it whispers, and we miss it when we're too busy proving we don't need it. A silence falls again, but this one feels different, not heavy, but clean. Oprah's eyes glisten. Whether from emotion or frustration, no one knows. But she doesn't interrupt. For once, she listens. The camera pans across the audience. A white woman clutches her purse with trembling fingers. A black teenager in the back silently mouths Jonathan's words. An elderly Sikh man leans forward, palms together, not in worship but in recognition. Something intangible passes through them, shared not by belief systems, but by presence. Another flashback rolls quietly through narration. Oprah in 2002, questioning a gospel singer who cried on air. She had called it emotional manipulation. The crowd had laughed, but now the same crowd isn't laughing. They're remembering. Jonathan continues slowly, like peeling back the last layer. You asked me earlier if I thought playing Jesus gave me divine insight. It didn't, but it forced me to look at people the way he did, not as threats or critics or brands. Just people trying to feel loved without having to earn it. Oprah exhales, almost inaudibly. Her usual confidence, the polished cadence, the perfectly paced clapbacks has vanished. And for a moment, she looks smaller, not diminished, but exposed. One final question comes, unplanned again. A young woman, her voice shaking, asks, so what do we do now? If we want to believe again? Jonathan looks toward her and then to the crowd, then finally the camera, as if speaking to every viewer sitting at home in quiet rooms. Start by letting people believe without mocking them. Start by asking less, do you deserve love? And more, have you been forgotten? Because faith, he says, pausing just long enough for the air to still, isn't about being right. It's about being found. The camera's red light flickers once. The show is still technically live, but no one cares about run sheets or ad breaks now. On a monitor backstage, a feed from the outside world shows watch parties erupting in silence, families frozen in living rooms, CAFS with muted televisions and full attention, a group of college students crying quietly on a dorm floor. Oprah adjusts her MIC, but says nothing. A rare moment. The queen of narrative has no ending to give, and Jonathan doesn't offer one. He just sits there unmoved, calm, and impossibly present. Fade to the final commercial dot in the dim glow of midnight. Reruns. The broadcast lingers far beyond its airtime. People don't scroll past it, they pause. They rewind. They sit with it. The clip of Jonathan's quiet defiance becomes more than content. It becomes a mirror. Across continents, faith leaders, skeptics, celebrities, and the disillusioned all find themselves strangely aligned, not by belief, but by the feeling that something true had slipped past the noise. Oprah's team scrambles behind polished statements and scheduled damage control, but the public's response is slower, deeper. They aren't outraged. They're disappointed. The kind that doesn't yell, it quietly leaves within 24 Hours, the comment sections under Oprah's page transform. Phrases like graceful ego and weaponized intellect repeat with sobering consistency. Video essays dissect not just what was said, but how it was said, the pacing, the tone, the interruptions. A montage goes viral, Oprah's laughter spliced beside Jonathan's silence, over a soundtrack of slow, ambient hymns. Millions watch, millions reflect. In contrast, Jonathan posts nothing more. No reaction video, no podcast appearances, not even a retweet. His team declines all requests for comment. A news anchor jokes, in a world where everyone talks, he went viral by not speaking, but it's not a joke. It's the truth. Instead of leaning into fame, Jonathan leans out. He's seen walking in Central Park with his hands in his pockets, nodding to strangers unnoticed except by those who recognize peace when they see it. He attends a local vigil for overdose victims. No cameras, no speeches, just presence. Meanwhile, Oprah's staff holds internal meetings. Analytics dip not drastically, but perceptibly. More jarring is the tone of longtime followers. She used to listen, one post reads, but now it feels like she only performs curiosity. Some defend her, many don't, but the loudest reaction is still silence, the kind that can't be managed. The cultural tide, subtle but undeniable, begins to turn. Churches, spiritual groups, even schools use Jonathan's segment as a teaching tool, not for theology but for empathy. A synagogue in Los Angeles projects a still frame of Jonathan's face during a sermon on humility. A spoken word artist in Atlanta performs a piece titled "When Faith Didn't Flinch." It trends for days. The phrase "Grace doesn't shout" becomes a slogan on murals, not merchandise. In Oprah's mansion, where gold frames line the walls, where every accolade has its own spotlight, the room feels heavier than usual. The screen is paused mid-expression, her face caught somewhere between authority and realization. She replays the final 20 minutes, not to analyze, but to feel. And this time, there's no notepad, no commentary, just her, watching a man who never raised his voice and yet made the entire world lean in. Outside her gates, a quiet vigil forms, not of protesters, but believers, some religious, some not holding candles. Signs read, "Belief isn't weakness" and "Let reverence live." They don't chant, they hum, and still, Jonathan remains away from spotlight. When a young reporter finally finds him on a bench near a bookstore, she asks cautiously, "Why didn't you say more?" People were ready to follow. He smiles, not amused, but gentle. "That's the thing about faith," he says. "It doesn't ask for followers, just witnesses." She presses, "But don't you think you changed something?" He shrugs lightly. "If I did, it wasn't because I planned to." He glances upward, the air quiet. "I just answered the way I hoped he would." She doesn't respond. There's nothing to add. And Jonathan, he simply rises, offers a nod, and walks off into a golden dusk. No entourage, no echo. Just a man whose silence did what speeches never could. The red light above the camera dies as the crew scrambles to cut to commercial, but the tension in the room doesn't ease with the silence. Jonathan Roumie remains seated, his hands gently clasped, his expression unchanged, serene, but no longer invisible. A production assistant rushes in to adjust the mic on Oprah's lapel, avoiding eye contact. From the shadows backstage, a junior researcher peers out, eyes wide, whispering to a colleague, "Did you see the audience's faces?" Another whispers back, "This wasn't how the PRE interview was supposed to go." Back in her chair, Oprah stiffens. For a moment, she stares down at her cue cards, flipping past questions designed to be safe, warm, affirming, the kind that build a brand, not confront it. She had planned a different path tonight, one that subtly mocked belief while praising personal growth narratives. But Jonathan didn't follow that script. He'd shifted the tone without raising his voice, not with aggression, but with stillness. Outside the studio, social media begins to simmer. Someone leaks a 15-second clip, Oprah's laughter, Jonathan's reply, and the deadly pause that followed. Within minutes, it spreads like wildfire. #ROUMIO and Oprah trends. He didn't even flinch. One tweet reads. Another, "Is this the first time Oprah looked unsure?" Yet, in the studio, none of this is known. The audience sits in quiet disbelief. The silence, once awkward, now feels sacred. Behind the glass, in the control booth, the director mutes her headset. "She underestimated him," she says. Flatly, a floor manager nods. He's not just an actor, he mutters. He came in with something to protect. As the set crew preps for segment 2, Oprah tilts her head and speaks to her producer through a tight smile. We'll steer this back. I just need one slip up, but what unnerves her isn't Jonathan's defiance, it's his control. No defensiveness, no fluster, just presence. Jonathan, meanwhile, looks around the room, not seeking validation but grounding himself. He thinks of the letter he received just before the show, a handwritten note from a widow who said his performance made her believe in forgiveness again. He had folded it into his pocket, and sure if he'd ever mention it on air. He still doesn't know if he will. That kind of truth, he believes, speaks for itself. An assistant offers him water. He declines with a smile, nodding gently in thanks. The air around him feels heavier, but he doesn't resist it. As the commercial break nears its end, stagehands buzz with anxious energy. Oprah flips her wrist twice, an old habit when she's about to reclaim control. But tonight, she's not. Walking back into a safe space, there's a new atmosphere, and it's thick with something she didn't anticipate. Reverence. A crew member counts down. Back in 5, 4, 3, 2. The red light clicks on again. Jonathan lifts his gaze and breathes in slowly. The second half is about to begin, but this time, the audience isn't waiting for Oprah. They're watching him. Backstage monitors flicker as viewership numbers spike. The control room scrambles to regain direction, but the narrative is no longer theirs to steer. The viral clip now dominates X, Instagram, and TikTok, stitched alongside past footage of Oprah shutting down uncomfortable faith moments. Patterns emerge, side-by-side comparisons, slowed down reactions, captions asking, was it always this? Condescending? Still seated under studio lights, Jonathan senses the shift, though no one speaks it aloud. His breathing remains steady, hands still folded. His restraint speaks louder than outrage ever could. The audience, growing more alert, leans in not for Oprah's next question, but to see what Jonathan might reveal just by being still. Oprah, ever the seasoned host, continues as if nothing has changed. But her voice betrays tension now. The vowels clipped, the charm a little too crisp. So tell me, Jonathan, where does faith fit into Hollywood? Her tone feigns curiosity, but beneath it is strategy, reduce belief to branding, morality to marketability. He offers a gentle smile, one almost apologetic, as if he mourns the question more than the intention behind it. It doesn't, he says, not unless you let it cost you something. The crew stiffens. Oprah blinks. There's no applause, but the silence grows denser. This isn't defiance, it's exposure. He's not defending himself. He's unveiling something. Not about himself, but about the room they're in. And people watching begin to feel it. In a control booth above, a technician scrolls through a Reddit thread erupting in real time. A user comments, I used to admire Oprah, but room is silence? That was holy. Another adds, this isn't about religion. It's about how we treat humility. Flashbacks deepen the stakes. We see Jonathan on the subway, script in hand, long before fame. A homeless man had once handed him a Bible with a broken spine, whispering, you're going to need this more than me. At the time, Jonathan thought it was odd. Now it feels prophetic. The narrator reveals how ridicule followed him even after success. Critics labeled his performance too devotional, too close to propaganda. One studio dropped him after a network exec said, audiences want superheroes, not saints, but Jonathan never fought back. Not once. Until now, without raising his voice, Oprah glances toward the monitor, eyes scanning the cue cards for a pivot, but the questions feel hollow now. Do you think people idolize faith because they're afraid of complexity? She asks. A sharp intellectual jab, clean and polished. Jonathan breathes in. Faith is complex, he says. It's the only thing I know that holds power and surrender in the same hand. Somewhere in the third row, a woman's eyes well up. Beside her, a young man puts down his phone. He's no longer filming, he's watching. Backstage, Oprah's producer whispers to another, cut him off if he starts preaching, but they both know it's too late. He's not preaching. He's testifying. In Detroit, a church basement. Projector replays the broadcast for a room of teenagers. A youth leader, eyes wide, says, he didn't come here to win. He came here to not be moved. Back in the studio, Oprah softens her voice. She tries one last redirection, but surely, Jonathan, you've had doubts. You must have questioned all this at some point. His reply lands like a stone in a still lake. Doubt is part of faith. Just like betrayal is part of forgiveness, Oprah finally blinks slower now, as if something just hit. Not the words, the weight beneath them. For a brief second, the power dynamic cracks, and in that fracture, a new kind of truth breathes. The show cuts to its final commercial. Lights dim again, but the audience isn't reaching for their phones. This time, they sit in stillness, stunned not by drama, but by grace. And outside the studio, the world listens in a way it hasn't in a long time, not to noise, but to conviction wrapped in quiet.